while Ms. Danglis has a moment to speak.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our wonderful performance tonight. We're here tonight because the school committee is graciously, having their meetings at all the different schools all over the district, which is wonderful. They get to come into different schools and kind of see what our students are doing and what they're up to, which are amazing things. So I want to quickly introduce who we have here tonight. We've got Elaine Holdsworth over there, who started Strings and Friends back in 2007 with just 14 students at the time. And now we're up to 190. And we now have Denise Gendron as the director since 2009. And she is a Minnechaug graduate and also has been the recipient of both state and national awards for Director of the Year. Congratulations. And we are so fortunate to be able to have this program in our elementary schools. So this year, we have 60 third graders just from Stony Hill School, which is amazing. That's a third of all of our third graders. Not every single one could make it tonight, but you're looking at almost everyone. They started this year because third grade is the year that this starts. So this is their first year, and they've only done a handful of performances. So I really want to say hats off to all of you boys and girls. I'm very proud of you for putting it out there and saying, I can do this, we believe in you, and you are going to be great. So thank you everyone for being here, and whoopsie, just a little chair, it's okay. And so with no further delay, let's get on with the show, and congratulations to all of you ahead of time. I know you're going to do a great job, and thank you Denise and Elaine.
I hadn't even thought of that. This is only their second performance, and we only learned of it last week. So they are being great sports and said, sure, we can do that. And so we're going to do more of a guided performance, which means I will be giving them some hints through some of the songs, because we only meet once a week, and some of them only had one lesson to practice these songs together. So we're going to start with a song everybody knows and loves. It works on beginning instruments. It's Mary Had a Little Lamb. Here is an introduction. I don't know where we're going to put them, but we'll find a way. It'll be okay. And they're going to play a long concert version of this song. We are only playing the original. This is Big Ben, all 8 notes of the clock tower in London that chimes. Sorry, that's all right, they're safe, it's okay? Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. That was exciting. So here we go with Big Ben. There's no introduction, I just say ready, play. And ready, to do, or any age really, but especially when they're just learning how to play their instruments. This is on a string they just started playing in January, the A string. We're going to continue using that as well as the D string notes that we use for Mary Had a Little Lamb, putting them together to what we know as the scale of D major. They know it as part of the June concert, which is going to have a space theme. And they know it as I like R2D2. So, goes on the D string. I will say it out loud before we start it. This is lesson 13, number 3, if you need it. Start on open D. Number 3, you start using the book. Everybody ready? Make sure your bow's right on the string. I'll say it first. I like R2D2. Some of the songs are always played for beginners or with beginners is because they only use a few notes. We're about to play Twinkle Twinkle. It's really hard on a string instrument. You have to cross strings. You have to go from no fingers to all your fingers on a different string in a half a second. So it actually takes a lot of practice to get there. We also had to learn what repeat signs are because in the middle of the song they have to go back and play something over again. Good place to get lost. Hopefully that will not happen. We are doing Twinkle Twinkle. There is a piano introduction. Put your bows right on the D string. Have your fingers ready. Introduction. Classes we have here is surprised by my telling them, put your bows down, because I forgot to tell them Tuesday morning. By the way, we're also going to play a pizzicato. We learn a lot of Italian terms. Well, I love doing languages with young kids. Pizzicato means to pluck. So we just learned this skill, same song, plucking the string. So either holding your bows or on the stand, whichever you prefer. It's okay. APL, same song, Twinkle Twinkle. Lesson 14, sorry. Thumb is against the fingerboard. First finger is plucking. Introduction. That's okay. You put it on the floor. That's okay. Thank you for thinking of that. Okay. Yeah, I know it's a little hard on the floor. We'll just take a second. Yeah, if you need to put it on the floor, they do fall off the stands. It's okay. Just be gentle. We wouldn't normally do that, but that makes sense tonight. All right, here we go. As you can tell, it's harder to play pizzicato. Hopefully by June, we have that skill in some of our concert music. None of this is our concert music, except for I Like R2D2. But we're using these skills in that music. And hopefully by then, they can all pluck at the same time. But that's a big challenge. We're not there yet. We are now going to play another very famous song that is short. It also uses a repeat sign with no partner, so they have to know to go back to the beginning and start over. But it's only 4 measures long. It's Hot Cross Buns. 2 times. Everybody got your F sharp ready? There's no introduction. I'm just going to say it. And ready, and... I get to tell them. That's a song from the medieval period, before stores had even been invented. People simply went out on the street, much like our farmers markets, and sold what they had, and they sang the song. Those were the advertisements. They didn't write, they didn't know how to write, so they sang. And they made sure that all the different people selling created songs that sounded good together. So you have hot cross buns and buy my lambs and whatever it is, and all the songs are different and they all sounded good together. Pretty clever people. So, we're going to do our last song, If You Can. Now I just said if you can to them because I told them if we had time, and we started early so we do, those who are able to are going to play the harder version of Twinkle Twinkle. What makes it harder? It's all eighth notes, the notes that are twice as fast as usual. That makes it twice as hard to play. Not everybody's ready to perform it, so they might be in rest position. But I've also said if you can play some of it, play what you can. And I was very pleased in the lessons this week. Some of the students, it's a 3-line song. Some learned the first line, which is also the third line, and they didn't do anything on the second. And other students said, I can't play the first line, they waited, and they played the second line. It was great. So maybe you'll see a lot of people playing Twinkle Twinkle as eighth notes. We'll find out. Everybody get ready who's playing. If you're not playing, you're in rest position. And there is an introduction. I'm so happy some of our school committee members were able to come to the December concerts. That was so wonderful. Delighted so they can see the progress. And then by June, it's astonishing what they'll learn because their parents let them play at home or say, go play. They just get better and better and better. We did not get to discuss how to leave quickly and efficiently and safely, so here's what we're doing. Violins only for the moment. No one's going to play through any of this. Are going to take their bows, their books, and their instrument, and they are just going to go down to the library and pack up. Their parents in a moment will come up and get their stands, but we'll go ahead right, as soon as you know you're ready, please be careful going through the forest of stands. If there is, Maya, can you come pick up all the cards, please? Well, Maya plays viola in road school, yay! Yep, all these things are going to be and now that they're gone, I think it better be violas, but you have to come down one of those two stairs. Don't use that one. Go right ahead and take your book, your bow, and your instrument. Oh, sorry, violas, yes, you may do that. I apologize, we changed it at the last minute. Cellos. Why don't you take just your cellos and bows? Come down the stairs, go down to the hallway, your parents will get your books and your stands. Thank you all for coming. Thank you at the last minute making this commitment.
Everyone, I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. I see that David Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access is recording. Is there anyone else who are recording this meeting? Okay. And I apologize, it's 6:37. We will do roll call and alphabetical order. Bill Mycombe. Here. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Patrick Kiernan.
Present.
Lisa Murray. Maura Ryan. Here. Michelle Boudreau. I here. If you please stand, Maura will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to start off by thanking Stony Hill School and Principal Monique Davis for hosting us this evening and for Strings and Friends for performing for us this evening. And we'd like to begin with our student representative, Molly Miller. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. We also have a note if like I'm being too quiet because I feel like my voice like in a fishbowl. But so today, student council went to Greenfield High School for a WMASC conference. Two of our fellow students ran for positions on the WMASC board. So Jayla Gomez was elected president, and Ethan Purcell is vice president. So a nice sweep of the officers over there. Minnetonka's Drama Club had a presentation of their play Pups. Over 400 people attended, which is like unprecedented for the club. It was good. I did a little jig and a little song in it, so it was really what to see. Class council nominations for the grades below me are now out. There's also an upcoming NHS officer election, so that should be late April, I believe. And the class of 2023 will be doing Country Bank's Credit for Life program next Tuesday, so that's to look forward to. That's everything.
Thank you. Any questions for Molly? Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Molly.
We will continue with the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations and Human Resources, Aaron.
Sure. So among my items, the first is the monthly financial report, which you have. A lot of black and red throughout as the year goes on. I'll go through a few items. Many we talked about a number of times, things like substitutes, but some areas that we're looking at more for the future as we're thinking about next year and the years forward. You'll notice we are slightly over in the business office. Sorry. We have had to do some upgrades to our time clock system and our infinite vision system, relatively small ones to stay current. One of the challenges we're facing is many of the components of our financial software are actually being moved to the cloud. So it's a situation where we have a self-hosted program, but more and more companies are selling cloud-based services where they do all of the good pieces. They do a lot of the management of servers, things like that. The challenge is it typically costs more. So we'd be paying an annual fee for that, for not only the software, but also for their hosting the software on our behalf. So we're starting to look at some of those costs and plan those out for the next few years. We'll have some conversations about those when those come up. If you look at the 1450 line item down in administration, much of that is Chromebook security. We talked about that. That's the security software we use to keep the Chromebooks secured. Again, that's something we're going to have to budget for going forward in addition to Chromebooks, depending on the avenues we decide to go down. As we go down further, another item that's quite over is our contracted services for instructional therapeutics, the line 2320, midway through the page. We have some very high-need students who are requiring a lot of sort of therapeutic help, so that is being paid by our contract services. We talked a little bit about some of those high-cost situations before. We talked about substitutes before. You will recall that I've increased the substitute budget for next year. There's a lot of conversation right now in my community around human resources and finance about, whether is this a short-term thing or is this a long-term thing? Is the use of sick time and the need for substitutes going to continue, or will it sort of peter away? So we'll be watching that. Next year, obviously, we felt like we needed to bring the budget up. In future years, if we see that start to go down, maybe we can bring it down a bit. But for now, we've had a number of years with very high substitute costs. And thankfully, we've had ESSER grant funding that can and will help with this. But for next year, as we start to wind down ESSER, we need to think about that. 2357, a little further back, those are the curriculum council stipends, the overage in that. Those weren't budgeted for, but those were part of the strategic plan and something we started this year. Again, something we can offset with ESSER this year, so doable. Athletics, you'll notice it's over budget. Athletics has been unfortunately in the red. As you see, we provided student fees for you this year. We haven't brought up athletic fees in quite a while. We also haven't really brought up, being mindful of the budget, we haven't really brought up this line item, knowing that transportation and other costs have increased. If anyone's familiar with, oh, I'm sorry, 5310 is on the next page, I apologize.
I was like, wait a minute. Sorry.
If anyone knows anything about the state of athletics in Massachusetts, Maya, the governing agency, has moved from doing regional tournaments to doing statewide tournaments, which means their costs to be in those tournaments and playoffs can be very high. So you could imagine a North Adams would have to play Nantucket in a first round playoff game for any given sport, right? So say football. That becomes really challenging. They used to have regional, Western Mass or even smaller regional games that led up to sort of the state championship game and Super Bowl, as it were, in football. It played out a little differently. So, you know, Wilbraham could be playing East Hampton, right? We're close to each other. We don't have to take a boat to get there, things like that. So the cost structure, that whole changing of the playoff picture has changed the cost structure. And we need to really look at that and think about that going forward. So we'll definitely be talking fees, athletic fees later this spring, as well as a need to at some point bring up that budget line in the next year. If we're going to continue. 4120 heat. It's been a mild winter. We typically encumber based on what we think we're going to need. So I'm actually a little hopeful there that we will disencumber that. It's like 4120 if I didn't make that clear. So we are hopeful that that will come down a little bit. As we've shared before, the 5200 and 5250 lines, those are the items that were previously covered by that contra account that we've eliminated that caused some confusion in the past. So you'll see at the bottom, I have the 835,000 we ordinarily offset that with at the very bottom of the financial report. That's the choice in that. And then again, going to the very bottom, the 9,000 series, those are all of our out-of-district tuitions that have really hit us hard this year. You'll notice pretty much all of those are in the red, and we've got a pretty big deficit there. Next year, we're definitely hoping to have higher circuit breakers or reimbursements, so we incur the cost this year, but next year we get some benefit in that, and we have used that to offset the budget the best we could for next year. Any questions on that?
So we had talked last year that there was an issue with the athletics, and so I guess, and I think, if I recall, the conversation was we were having less students sign up for athletics. So at some point, will we get, has there been the conversation about when there's just not enough people to participate? As much as I hate to say cancel the program,
Yeah.
but if it doesn't warrant having the program, I mean, we shouldn't pay to fund it if there's not enough kids for it. So I'm just
Right. I
wondering.
think that's going to be part of our fees conversation. You know, the COVID, the coming back from COVID is something we wanted to see, and I will have Steve or Brad maybe put together a participation analysis for us. Try to figure that out. Bill, were you wanting to say something before you go up?
No, you addressed it. I just wanted to reiterate the impacts of COVID that it had on athletic participation.
So the next item is our audit report. We have no findings this year, as we've had in the past, which is good. You know, findings are those items that are tangible in the context of our financial statements and our financial representation, as well as our regulatory compliance. What I'm sharing with you is management letter items. These are items that actually aren't typically shared with school committees or boards. They're meant for management. They're opportunities for the auditor to say, hey, these are some areas where you might do a little bit better. So I'm not going to go through all of the items on there. You're welcome to read through them. There's about 5 areas, and I've shared sort of our plans going forward with each of those areas. One of them towards the back is our OPEB. We are actually actively working to try to shore that up a little bit. But as you can see, it's not a tangible concern, given we have about $428,000 in our OPEB account against a $63 million liability. So, if that were tangible, it would be, we'd be a lot closer to that. So, any questions on that? Okay.
So just one,
Sure.
just one thing to note on the audit report. I believe I raised this in the December 15th meeting with regards to the procurement of the vendors and the ultimate choice for the vendors that we do not follow Massachusetts general law with regards to procurement. Just wanted to draw everybody's attention to what is listed in page 1 of the memorandum, which states that we were indeed not in compliance with that law.
We had more than 3 quotes. When we were ultimately deciding, we were
Right.
just debating between 2, but we had more than 3 quotes.
Right, but the law states that the vendor with the lowest cost was not chosen and no documentation was provided to support that decision.
And then per MASC, sorry, I'll just go over the language very quickly.
Aaron, did they say anything to you about when they made, I know that most of its recommendations, that they had said, we recommend that in the future the school district maintain documentation to support compliance with Chapter 30B for all applicable purchases of goods and services.
Sure.
So I know our meeting minutes include all the handouts, so
Yeah.
all of the
Sure.
quotes we had, all the information we had from each of the
So-
selected quotes.
Right. So the question is who was the lowest bidder,
Okay.
right? So they're citing, a lot of this. The documentation was there in terms of the bids. The school committee selected an entity that was not the lowest bidder.
That part I understand, but there's all these other explanation that if that's the case,
Sure.
but there was all supporting documentation supplied and identified during the school committee meetings that are documented in the meeting minutes. So for them to say there was only 2, I understand based on the vendor selection because it came down to 2 options really.
Yes, I'm sorry, there were 3 quotes. I'm not sure why that says 2. You had 2.
We had 5.
Yes.
So Bill,
The
regarding.
issue is less with the number of quotes than it
Yep,
is with not
But I
selecting
just,
quotes.
was the documentation call out that I was concerned with, right? So, because I know that there was documentation, we were all provided documentation, we have
Yes.
to, for public record, supplied documentation, so.
Yes, we should have sent all 3 of them to them. I missed that 2 versus 3. I definitely sent them all. We had all.
Thank you.
So per bidding for consulting of services, so in terms of contracting, this is per MASC, these were from our reps, both, from 2 of our reps. In terms of contracting with a consultant to manage our superintendent search, because the amount of the service is less than $50,000, bidding is not required, Mass General Law 30-39M. The committee has already solicited quotes from other vendors to provide the service, which is required for an expenditure of $10,000, MGL 30B-4. So the committee has the authority to determine which vendor to contract with to provide services related to the superintendent search.
So I hear the word bidding, but I think there's a difference between bidding and quotes, if I'm not mistaken. Bidding is when you have a specific scope of services that is proposed to each prospective applicant for the process, whereas quotes are simply you are given a broad area like a superintendent search. I think what they're looking at is the fact that when we chose NASDAQ over MASC, I think what they're looking for is reasoning behind it. If I'm reading the law correctly, the law is that anything over $50,000 requires a bid, which means you have to actually provide a very accurate scope of services for what it is that you're doing.
It was no.
So I would probably ask MASC for clarification on that. Because it seems to be that it's inconsistent with what the law states.
Either that or the entity that's doing the audit isn't aware of the fact that you are able to do that. The process isn't, I mean, there's another Mass General law, so in an effort to make sure that we're complying with the law, that's why she made that reference.
I think to clarify this,
We're happy to take a look at that language.
I just want to make sure that they know why we did what we did.
I probably would send a copy of this to MASC along with a copy of the email that you just read, and ask them to verify that. Again, I mean, there's people in the community that are going to read this and say, okay, well, you know, what happened? So I think we owe people an explanation as to why this is written here.
Any other questions? Okay. I would move to the lighting update. The lights work. Chuck, they still work. The one thing I'm sharing is that Mike Messi and I have been in contact with the Inspector General's office. We held a virtual meeting with a member of their legal staff. He is just sort of preparing materials. Obviously, they've become aware of everything. They've seen everything as well. So we're sharing information with them. He is going to refer it to the recovery team for review and see if there's any validity to, you know, our ability to recover any funds from anyone else's. Yes. Sure.
Was there any discussion in the IG's office about how that vendor was actually placed on an MSBA approved vendor list? Because it would seem to me that the problem is the vetting, right? So you would assume that when you have a vendor that is placed as an approved vendor on that list, and the general contractor is choosing which subcontractor to use for the lighting, that would have been vetted. So did you guys have any discussions at that level?
We shared with him that, you know, we were, I want to say we were the first in the Northeast to ever, you know, use this lighting system. We were one of the first adopters of this lighting system. You know, and you know, he also works with MSBA, and that was one of the things he's also trying to do is get some takeaways to the process to share with MSBA to say, well, maybe you don't want to be the first adopter of a brand new technology, right?
It's true.
You know, let someone else work the bugs out, maybe.
Right. Well, aside from that, I mean, I would hope there would be a vetting process that would, you know, that would provide you at least, like frequently asked questions. You know, like what do we do if the software goes down? You know, is there a way to manually control the light? So, you would expect that the general contractor would be working with the subcontractor, and those things would sort of be fleshed out as the building was being built. Obviously, that wasn't done, but I'd be interested to hear, how that vendor was actually approved and how it is that you managed to install a lighting system that had no way to override the software that was controlling it.
But didn't we hear at one point that the software company that originally installed it got sold to somebody else, who got sold to somebody else, and then there was this trail of other people? I mean, but to your point, that yes, there should be vetting even when the hands change by the MSBA, but I mean.
Yeah, at the very beginning, right, just when it was first on the vendor list, I would hope that there was somebody with qualifications to look at how that lighting system was designed and say to themselves, hey, if you end up with a software glitch, you basically have no way to manually override this. You heard people, on social media talking about, well, you just go to the breaker panel and turn them on and off. It's like, well, it's not that easy, When the wires are coming in.
There's a huge possibility that there was no requirement for anybody to say that someone was a source, and I know that over the last 20 or 30 years, they've done a lot to try to restrict how someone gets qualified, who gets qualified. The fact that we put the building in, there's a huge chance that didn't exist, like that whole process of vetting and the requirements for all the procurement policies that they put into place at the state level.
It'd be interesting to know, like, what safeguards they've put in, because, unfortunately for the taxpayers of our two communities, we ended up eating $100,000 worth of utility bills that we weren't anticipating.
And the reality is, MSBA is funding half the project and control most of the project, right? So, you know, second guessing them, even if I was there at the time, I'd be trying to argue against an electrical engineer with 20 years of experience, right? Like, I'm not sure I'd try to put myself in front of him, right? So, you know, they've got people designing these buildings now.
Right, yeah, but the point being is that they have an approved vendor list that those general contractors are drawing from, so you would think that before they were even put on that list, that system would be reviewed by that electrical engineer with 20 years experience to say, you know what, I see some problems with this.
So being on the other side of that, I actually applied and we got on the contracts, different contracts. And the process was you didn't really have to prove your technology. You just had to prove your company that you would stand by the technology.
And if you're
So-
financially sound.
Yeah, that you're financially sound, right? So if someone bought out a company, you know, and they're unscrupulous, I'm not saying that these people are unscrupulous, but, you know, I would say that I'm not sure what the new procurement, what the laws are to get on state contract. But yeah, it was just about the individual company, not necessarily the technology, unfortunately.
Moving ahead, hopefully recovery will work in our favor. I think we have a pretty strong argument.
Did we ever, so I know that we talked and I gave you how to calculate the kilowatt. Did we ever determine how many kilowatts? Because we also utilized a lot of our solar credits
Right,
to offset that, which shouldn't, I mean, we can't get those back.
So-
And I realize it helped, but
right.
that's
So-
money that we pay into the solar
Yeah.
program.
I don't have every single bulb in the school. Like,
It's only the ones that go on the system, and I know that the lights specifically call out the kilowatt number is on it.
right, but that would mean going into every light and counting every fixture in the school.
But I thought you said we knew how many. I thought you
That
said it
was
was
an
7.
estimate. 7,000 was an estimate.
But do we have a dollar amount figure at this point? Because I mean, it's been
I've
months.
got, if I was guessing based on what we have, it's ranged between 2 and 10,000 with an average of about 5,000. That's what I figured.
So the total of that, so you figured that on based on a 12-month year or 2-year, 3-year?
So a year and a half, so 18 months at about $5,000 a month, about $90,000.
Okay.
My best guess.
It's not funny, but it's sad.
So moving on, we have a crack in the heat exchange unit in one of the boilers at Minnetonka. There are 5 boilers at Minnetonka. The system can surely run on 4 boilers. So this isn't an imminent emergency. We can shut that boiler off. We can probably get through the next year on 4 boilers. But this is something that's going to have to go on our capital plan. It's going to have to be an item that we push for next year in the capital process. The unit itself is about $58,000. We've been working with the vendor. The real big part is because all of our boilers are on the 2nd floor, we're going to need a crane to get the old boiler out, the new in, and do that replacement. So, you know, total cost, we're looking at somewhere probably a little north of $100,000 in costs. We have looked at warranty. We are past the warranty period. The warranty period was 10 years from 60 days after the date of manufacture. So it's not even after the install, it's 60 days after the date of manufacture that clocks. So even with 10 years from the date of install, we're beyond the warranty periods. And that this is, you know, Minnetonka's getting long in the tooth. This is not entirely unexpected that we might have something like this happen.
So I know the town of Camden has a special fall town meeting, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Wilbraham could potentially have a special meeting called that we could have this as a separate item number. We go back to the town to the special town meeting to ask then if we don't want to do it now. I'm just putting that out there as something to consider if we don't.
It's too late now.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's too late now for, it could be reallocated as whatever the capital is. I don't know if the warrant articles are written down, but there could be consideration for the fall. If if we needed to try to allocate funds for that into next year.
If there was a special town meeting in the fall, you certainly could have prepared. I don't know if there's plans.
I know Camden does one every year, so.
Plans to do one over him, so if so, then, yeah, we certainly could prepare an article for the warrant.
Just a thought
For that.
for you guys to think about for next year.
My guess is this is going to want to be a summer project, just based on the work that's
You don't want to
going
do it
down.
at night,
We're bringing a crane in, a lot of folks up on the roof, probably shutting the boilers down.
Who's the manufacturer?
Hmm?
Who is the manufacturer?
I don't have that in front of me, you might have to find out.
He probably knows a guy. Just kidding.
How are the other 4 boilers?
They seem fine, no issues. This came as a result of they had a leak in the system, and it was leaking coolant, and they've been for literally the past couple of weeks running through the whole system, shutting things off, figuring out where the leak is. They started with the rooftop units, trying to figure out if it was there, and then pretty much the last thing you check is the boiler.
Is there a spreadsheet kept someplace of all the boilers, all the information that you're looking for to know what their manufacturer's dates are, when they could potentially be out of warranty, just so, because I haven't seen the boilers listed on the capital plans for the last few years, but it's definitely something we need to consider even at other schools.
Most of the boilers in the district are relatively new. I'm trying to think, I'd have to look at the capital plan to see when the next one we have. They're 25, 30-year typical life style, life span for the whole system. Components that we come and go, that's the challenge.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
I was just-
We'll keep you posted. It's still early in that process.
I was just asking Patrick was saying that this is what this company does. Right? So, one of the things that we might want to keep in mind is just saying that the average life expectancy for those is 15, 20 years.
Well, the total system's like 25, 30 years, but you're going to start to see breaks about 10 to 15 years. So we're going to see one.
Keeping it on the short list of
Yeah.
capital needs.
That'll be a primary for next year.
Now that would be one of those things that would qualify as an expense for the job stabilization fund.
Correct.
That was what it was put.
100%.
Fair enough. Alrighty, I think that is the end of my time. Unless anyone has any
Do you need anything from us?
No, I think we're good. Thank
Just
you.
checking.
Thank you for asking.
I thought when
Can we talk
about
fees?
What?
Can we talk fees?
Yeah.
Fees is.
You gotta use the microphone, because we can't hear you way down. Sorry.
Fees is further down.
Oh, okay.
Yep, yep.
Stay on the line, Decker.
So just on this, when we were talking about the stabilization fund, when we had everyone from the towns together, I was under the impression that we were going to use that fund to, do the research and stuff, but actually, and this is another one, is this fund what we would use for the boiler, or is this fund what we would use to figure out how to do the boiler?
So we had a conversation that we're reviewing this at policy so that because we as a school committee should have a policy about how we want that to be used.
Excellent.
We had a brief touch on it, it'll likely come up again, and then we'll have to have a serious conversation about trying to get that voted through so we have something.
Well, it'd be good to have, I would say have, if it's okay,
Definitely.
have a conversation with everybody, and then have us decide something, and then the policy can go and write it up, rather than the other way around.
Well, I think
That's
it
not
was,
what we decided in the meeting.
it was sent back to policy for us to come back to you and you guys to say, hey, yeah, that's a good idea, we'll go that route.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So we can give you some options, I guess.
Gotcha.
Thank you. On to new business. So it's our second school committee meeting in April. It falls during April vacation, so do we want to, are people available the following week?
What's
Or
the
do we want
date?
to do the week before?
27.
And then is it Thursday?
It's a Thursday.
Correct.
Yes, I can do the 27th.
So then that means that then, but we'll have back-to-back meetings the first week of May.
Correct.
Do we know what graduation is?
Yes.
You, but I don't have that in front of me.
That's not till June though, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't want to
Second
jump
or
the
third, I
gun.
think it is.
Is that?
Like the second or third.
Yeah, it's Friday.
Okay. That's not till June. For some reason I was thinking May. Sorry about that. I know that works for me. Are you available on the 27th? Yep.
27th.
27th, yeah.
27th.
Oh, sorry.
Patrick and Bill.
Oh,
Bill, you good for the 27th?
Check.
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
I might be late, but most likely I can do
Patrick?
I'm good.
You said getting it good.
Yeah.
The general consensus is the 27th will work, from what I could hear.
All right, thank you. So moving on to old business, the FY24 budget. John?
Sure. I think that it might be more expeditious to start with the second item because I like a little bit of a shorter discussion. So, although the budget that the school committee passed only included 7 reductions, which were the 7 reductions that were based on positions that were planned to be phased out because of ESSERS. There are a number of other positions that are somewhat up in the air right now because the status of the budget is unclear. And that can bring into play contractual obligations to notify employees. So 2 things have had to be done. One is to work through that whole process of bumping that I had explained at prior meetings. And second, have conversation with the union about notification to make sure that we're on the same page. So district administration met with union leadership this week to determine which employees would be impacted if the budget was not passed. So there are some retirements and vacancies that will help us mitigate the impact of potential staff reductions, at least on the employees, not on the kids. Because when you have those reductions that you can place someone into a retiring person's position, that is a savings of our employee, but it means that we're not replacing the position that that person's coming out of, so it still has an impact on the kids. But anyways, as we worked through all the different potential bumping scenarios, we taking into account the known retirements, taking into account the vacancies we currently have. We have a total of 22 employees who are subject to non-renewal potentially, 11 teachers, and 11 paraprofessionals. Now, under the contract, these would all be non-renewals because these are all either teachers who are in their first 3 years who don't have non-professional teacher status yet, or they'd be paraprofessionals who were hired this past year. So the contractual date for notification for both of those groups would be June 15th. The association has asked us to treat the 2 different groups differently because of different circumstances that pertain to each. So paraprofessional bumping is not based on licensure. There is no licensure required for that position. Essentially, any paraprofessional can bump any other paraprofessional. They also have a higher turnover within the unit, which includes 6 vacancies that are currently posted. So if we had to reduce 11 paraprofessionals tomorrow, we'd send a separation notice and send immediate recall notices to 6 of them, putting them into the 6 positions that are currently vacant. Teachers, however, have a different scenario. Teacher bumping is dependent on licensure. Teachers can only bump into another position that they have an appropriate license for, and they have the potential, at least some of them, to obtain additional licenses between now and the time when this bumping might have to take place. And so, based on that, the union's perspective was that it would be best to do notification to teachers as soon as possible, which could really be next week because we figured out both individuals would be bumped out and the individuals would get reassignment notices because they'd be put into other positions through reductions of their positions. However, the paraprofessionals asked us to delay to as close to that June 15th date as possible because we have more options and we have more vacancies, and there may be other retirements that would be made known between now and then. And so they feel that it would be best if we have the ability to do a recall at the same time as a reduction to do that. So they'd like us to sort of play for time there. And so really what I'm coming to you tonight with is just to see if first of all, to notify you of that, because the last meeting we passed the budget, it didn't include all of these reduction notices, and I didn't want you to be surprised if you heard that our office was sending out a bunch of reductions. But second of all, to see if you're in agreement with that approach of doing a bifurcated notification of employees, starting with the licensed staff, letting them know as soon as possible so that they can address potential personal licensure issues, and holding off to notify paraprofessionals until they're done. Of course, this is all in the context of hope that we don't have to do any of these, but in order to meet our contractual obligations, we have to think about notifications at this time based on communications we've received about the potential outcome of the budget.
So the last meeting, we were provided a list of potential financial impacts that could take place. Do we know what the plan is? Can that information, can we be provided additional information as to, I'm assuming some of those items on that list won't be used, some might still be, because that was the first time I had an idea of what was potentially going to be impacted.
Well, what we did was we went through that memorandum with the union and said, okay, these are the positions that would be reduced if we have to make up this gap. We identified the incumbents in those positions, and then we identified the least senior people who those incumbents could bump out. So that, if you are asking for the list of how that bumping would work, we certainly can provide that for you.
I'm just looking to see of all those lists, because it totaled over $900,000.
Right.
If you add them all up, and I realize it may not, all of that may not be required, but what are you not considering? What are you considering? You know what I mean? I'm just looking to understand. That's a whole lot of stuff.
Well,
So
it was an $800,000 deficit that we were looking to cover, and we were anticipating that we would incur some unemployment costs in trying to cover that. So that's why the total was more than $800,000.
Yep.
So it's everything that was on that list.
Okay.
I'm just saying, it's a kick in the teeth, isn't it? I mean, getting a pink slip. Hey, you're doing a great job. School's going well. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, here's a pink slip. Maybe it's going to happen. Maybe it's not going to happen. I wouldn't work for a job that treated me like that.
I think that this isn't the first time we've heard that this pink slip process happens,
I know.
where they've done it and sometimes they get recalled and they bring them back. I'm not saying it's the right thing. I just think it's part of this process. It's why they have a contract written the way that they do. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that I don't think people are surprised that when it has to happen. And I think the way the economy is right now, there's a lot of things going on that if we can shield as much as we can, I think we should try.
So I think when we voted at the last meeting, I think the members of the committee had all agreed that the list of potential cuts to the district was devastating. I have had the opportunity to see the letter that was forwarded by the Finance Committee regarding reopening discussions regarding the budget. So I've tentatively set up a subcommittee meeting on Monday. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to sit down in a more informal setting, and we can talk about that. I really would like to hold off on sending anything out until we at least have a chance to engage with that. Is that fair?
It's totally fair. My only thing I would say is the second meeting isn't until the 27th now. So if there's a desire to send things out earlier, do we want to create a mechanism that would allow that to happen without?
Well, we could always,
coming together again?
we could always post and just do a Zoom if we had to, so we didn't have to drag people away. And if it would be a very short agenda, basically addressing that one issue.
Why don't we just give you the authorization to do so tonight, and if it needs to meet, it's not needed.
In consultation, maybe with the budget subcommittee,
And the chair.
The chair of the committee.
So does that need to be a motion, or is that?
No, I think we have to.
It's just-
I'm so sorry, Alex, there was expanded.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
So what Patrick's suggestion was is to give authorization to send the pink slips out pending the discussion that we have at the subcommittee level. And what we'll do is we will notify, well, you'll be there, and then we'll notify you to make sure that you know. And if we don't have to do it, then you guys will know.
So it doesn't have to be the whole committee, it will just be the finance subcommittee and you in consultation with John.
I don't know that, because I think we as a full committee have to agree what the conversation should be on Monday. Because while, Bill, you called the meeting, again, it goes back to the full committee tasks, the subcommittees with what they do. And so I just want to make sure that we as a full committee are understanding what that conversation on Monday is to be. And if we're going to give the latitude, the subcommittees can't make decisions for the full committee. So to Patrick's
Correct.
point, if we agree that we're going to give him the latitude, give the superintendent, the assistant superintendent the latitude, we as the full committee should just make that decision tonight. If he feels that's what should come of that meeting. I don't know that we as a subcommittee should be telling him, yeah, go ahead and do it now.
I think that was the premise behind what Patrick was suggesting, was that the authorization would be to send out the pink slips if there was a change in that based on the discussions that were had at the subcommittee level, that it would require more conversation. That way, it's just sort of a, it's sort of a self-executing order, if you will. And if it requires consultation with the committee. Listen, I don't want to make the decision by myself.
Oh, yeah, no.
So I would
neither
say
do
that, I would say that if we have, if we have a breakthrough in the meeting, and it is a decision to not send out the pink slips, then it will require going back to the committee and making sure that the committee understands.
So because I'm until Thursday, 27th, we would allow for him to do that Tuesday or Wednesday. Sorry, I'm just explaining to Michelle that because the part of why we were doing the latitude was because our next meeting is until the 27th. So then he would need to get, because she's like, when would he make that decision? So we could do that as early as Tuesday of next week after the finance sub meeting.
Correct.
So I'm just clarifying so you can hear.
We said yes today, when would you normally send them out?
I would say if we said yes today, we would send them out next week because we've identified the individuals. Can I say, Aaron brought up a point, but there is a 60-day requirement also in the contract, which is April 15th. But I think these folks all will be June 15th because of their stats.
So that's when you would give them the update? Is that right?
That's the absolute deadline. If we miss that deadline, they will be our employees whether or not there's money to pay them.
I think the only stipulation that I would have in how that is actually done is after the subcommittee meeting on Monday, any communication with the chair will have to be through you and not through one
Sure. Okay, thank you.
You thought that was a short one?
My prognostication skills are not always the best, so I can say. So next, I did want to make the full committee aware that we received a communication from Mark Ducey, who's here tonight. I thought that it would be worthwhile to have a conversation about what and how the committee might want to respond to that. Because of what, it was not addressed to the full committee, but I think any kind of response would have to be from the full committee. So that's why it's on your agenda tonight.
So as I had stated earlier, that was the letter that I had read in the packet for preparation. I think that to have the subcommittee meeting on Monday, I think would be an adequate response. And we'll go from there. And I know that on the letter, there was a deadline that was set for yesterday as far as having the budgets in, but you know, the conversation still has to go on.
So, a couple questions on that. What have we done within the budget to look to reduce some of what's already there? So, and this may lead into the next conversation on student fees, but I was struck by the fact that the memo that was shared about here are all the cuts. Nothing regarding fees was included in the regular budget. Now we see in the memo saying it's $7,500. To me, that may be small dollars, but that's the type of thing we should be doing already to reduce our budget, not the draconian worst case scenario. Then we start looking at it. When we look at it, I think there are a lot of questions that we can go through from the fee standpoint, but you know, the inflation rate's like 23% since we last increased activity fees. I think it's 6-point-something% through February, year over year, yet we have no increases there. And it seemed like the concern was that it may negatively impact students that are economically disenfranchised. However, from our policy standpoint, either we need to have a firm policy that works for free and reduced lunch with free and reduced fees, or use the policy that we have. I'm not sure, since it seemed to be a little wishy-washy on how that gets followed. I think there are questions, right, that we should look at from overall. We've made, so I'll go through the 6 years that I've been on the committee, I think we've made a couple large investments. One of them was the middle school model. One of them was on social emotional health and adding social emotional resources. One of them was reducing the elementary class sizes and increasing teachers. One of them was adding instructional coaches. And I don't know that we've ever really sat there and said, and this is probably the wrong term in education, what's the return on the investment? Is it worth it? Are we getting what we should be getting? And if we're not, then let's look at that differently, because those are the type of things we're looking at the budget. I think it's much easier to sit there and say, hey, we looked under every couch cushion and we took every quarter that we could find, as opposed to what seems like there's still some low-hanging fruit that's sitting out there that we haven't gone after. I think if we look at it, right, and I know it's difficult when we talk about positions, but we added, I believe, 2 assistant principals last year or 2 years ago based off of school choice dollars. Well, we know one of them, I think, should be self-sustaining based off what we voted on. The other one, frankly, I don't know that it is, right? So if we look at it, are we covering those costs in that building with school choice students or not? So these are some of the things that I just, maybe those conversations have happened. When we look at the TWB move, I still, and I'm going to say it, or potential move, I don't understand why we would be building out office space for cubicles when the staffing numbers look the same from 2018, and I don't know what they were when we moved into the office, but it seems like some of these things are nice to haves, maybe not need to haves, and when we're trying to cut a budget and we're going to the town saying, hey, we need you to pay more than what you're comfortable paying, I'd like to think that we've done every single thing that we can, and we're saying this is the drop dead budget, and maybe that's what will happen on Monday. But right now, I would tell you, I don't feel like we've done every single thing that we can within the budget.
I mean, it's easy to say, go after the low-hanging fruit, right? Because low-hanging fruit's low-hanging fruit. You go and pick it, and boom, you got your apple, right? But if there's no low-hanging fruit, you know, if low-hanging fruit is actually going to gut some of the things that we're doing, is going to have less teachers, less social-emotional support for our children, you know, it's easy to say, hey, let's find a compromise, let's meet in the middle, let's whatever, but these are real costs, and they're going to have real effects on our children. And maybe you don't have kids in the districts that or in the schools that are going to be affected, but I'm telling you, it's some, excuse me?
You should, that's just not the right, that's not the right tone to have by saying someone who doesn't have.
Yeah, I don't need you to correct my tone, but thank you very much, it's duly noted.
Sean, I think the bigger point is our investment worth it, right? We've made pretty healthy staffing increases over 6 years in 4 primary different areas. And I think we need to ask ourselves that question, are there metrics that can show it has been a successful investment? Maybe there aren't, but that's something that we have certainly increased, and I think we've taken great pride, and those were overarching things that we believed in, but I don't know that we understand the true impact on those investments within the educational system. That's all I would like to understand more than anything.
Sure, so just a couple of responses to that. I think in terms of the low-hanging fruit and the scouring of the budget to try to make the gap as small as possible, I think that essentially is covered in the background section of the memo, where we talk about this starting as a $3 million increase from year to year, and there's about $1 million that we were able to strip out through different means of looking at different budgetary measures. The changes to transportation are another means of trying to get some low-hanging fruit to help reduce the costs. In terms of return on investment for projects that were started in prior years, it would be really impossible to do that in the context of the budget process at this time. I can't share just generally, education is a multivariate process, and isolating the impact of each individual variable is really hard to do. But if that's something the school committee wishes, there are ways of addressing it. We just went through an equity audit as part of the process of looking through everything to see what impacts have been on equity. You can do similar kinds of things for what was the impact of the middle school model, what was the impact of lower class sizes. So that type of analysis can be done, but it can't be done quickly or at this time. All I can say about my understanding of the moving costs from TWB is I think as I look at it, the main driver is that about half of the staff, actually more than half of the staff who we need homes for were staff that were never at the high school. There were some staff that were, with the special education office, who I think would probably come back, but the health staff, the safety staff, the outreach worker, those were always TWB, so it would be a matter of finding spots for them. And then I do think there are some other ways to make this whole system work much better and to set us up for a more efficient model in the future. I think a lot of that has to do with the work of the planning committee. But again, I don't think the planning committee can reach a conclusion to its process for the FY24 budget.
So I agree with Patrick that we've made some great strides in what we're providing in education. The move back to the middle school model, I think, was probably one of the greatest single strides that our school committee have made. The other things that we've done in one of the things that wasn't mentioned was reducing class sizes at the elementary level, especially at the lower grades. I can understand exactly the point that Patrick is making to say, okay, you know, what's the ROI on that? But as I've said many times before, trying to figure that out is kind of like trying to figure out how much vanilla you put in cake batter after you mixed it. Really hard because there's so many different variables that come into play. I think the better metric to look at is if we were to go back to where we were, what would be the negative impacts? And that, I think, is probably a more telling metric than to say, where were we 6 years ago? Where are we now? What has been the improvement? From having kids that have gone through the elementary schools, middle school, the high school, I think I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on at each level, at least with the schools that my kids are currently attending. And I will tell you that there's a boatload of issues that we have going on in all of our schools. And the concept that we're going to back off on what we're doing with social emotional learning, I think is just it's irresponsible. I can tell you right now that I have been apprised of issues that have surprised me, and I will tell you that there is no question in my mind that we are dealing with a huge cohort of kids who are still really suffering from the social impacts of 18 months of forced lockdowns. And it's devastating and it's maddening. It really is. Especially those kids who are from single child households who had little to no socialization within that time period. These kids need help. And so I would never want to do that. And you know, the middle school model, you can make budget recommendations all you want. I've never met an educator who has told me that the junior high model is superior. At the middle school model, it costs more money, but it is much more effective in keeping track of students. And I've seen it myself with 2 of my children who've gone through middle school. It's not always the best of times, but it's probably the best way that we can keep tabs on people. So keep tabs on our students. So I can understand the desire to have that type of analysis, but I shudder to think what would happen if we were to revert back to the way things were. And even at class sizes at 23, 24, at the 4th and 5th grade level, it's a challenge. And challenges that we weren't facing 6 years ago, before we had all of the impacts of the pandemic and societal shutdowns accompanied that.
So, just to clarify, it wasn't a recommendation to do any of that. It was simply a question of what's the return on our investment. So I think as we look at it, it doesn't make sense. So, and John, this is part of what I'm looking at. So, okay, if we were to say student services could move back to Minichog, that's $53,500 right there. You're also then only talking about 6 people that need a location. Again, not going to get into the weeds, but I find it hard to believe that we can't find a place for 6 people within all of the other infrastructure and buildings that we have. And maybe all the analysis has been done and we're saying this is absolutely where we are. I just struggle putting it to the town and saying we've done every single thing we can and we're truly standing here saying we can do nothing else, because for one member, and it's only one member, it doesn't feel like we've done that.
So I can't speak to the construction costs. I wasn't part of the discussion with regards to the relocation costs of closing TWB. What I can speak to is the actual operating costs of that building and what the potential savings would be if that building were to be closed immediately. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think it is fiscally irresponsible to do any type of relocation, reconstruction, until we have a firm commitment from the district on what we are planning to do moving forward in a comprehensive fashion. I don't think the operating costs of TWB top probably 20% of what those construction costs are when we take all things together. But one of the things we have to remember about construction costs is when we think about construction in the private sector versus construction in the public sector, a lot of things we don't have to worry about in the private sector. Number one is unions, the prevailing wage. So anything that you do in the public sector is going to cost you at least twice as much as what it would in the private sector. So when I see costs ballooning to $175,000 for construction costs within a public school building, it doesn't surprise me. Especially when you look at, I think, the proposed construction costs for the new high school that was proposed in East Long Meadow was $183 million. I had somebody, I don't know whether that number is accurate, but it wouldn't shock me.
So, I guess just, in response to the costs, our perspective is we'd rather underpromise and overdeliver on this. So if I told you it was going to be $100,000 and it turned out to be $125,000, how would that conversation go, right? So what I would like to do is say, yes, it could be upwards of $175,000. I don't think it's going to be that much, right? I don't think we're going to need to spend that much. I think there are things we can do. We also have, multiple classrooms that need to move over as well. So we're talking about space, it's finding space for multiple classrooms. And then also not trying to then put barriers in place for the planning committee, right? So the planning committee, yes, can we find space? Yeah, we can probably find classrooms in Minichog. But then, if the decision becomes moving 8th graders to Minichog, all the work we've done building out those classrooms and moving people is just going to get undone. So, we're happy to do some of that. I just don't want to put bad money on top of bad money in the process as well. So, yes, do I think it's going to cost a full $175,000 to make these moves? Probably not, but I don't want to be sitting here in a position where the school committee grants us X dollars, and then I have to tell the school committee it's going to be significantly more because of A, B, C. In every one of these rooms, we have an office, we have to have separate HVAC, lighting systems, electrical systems in those offices. And once we do those, we have to then take them out. We're not just putting them in at a lot of cost for taking them out. So I'm just trying to be fair in terms of what we're talking about. And again, probably not 175,000, but I'd rather we're fair in that regard.
I just wanted to jump in. I want to make this clear to everybody, and I want to make sure I'm on the right page with this, okay? If we close down, and we're going to pull everybody out, not close down, we pull everybody out of TWB tomorrow, okay? We still have to plow when it snows. We still have to mow the lawns. We still have to heat the place. We still have to have electricity in the place, and we still have to keep the building open. Is that correct? Right.
Not entirely correct.
What?
So the service level, if you read the lease, there is nothing in there that speaks to the service level of heating and electricity. So you could very easily make the argument that the heating and electricity costs would be substantially less if what you were doing is using the building up to the lease agreement, which would allow for certain things like town meeting, recreation department, etc., which is not used. Yes, you would still have to plow, you would still have to do maintenance. It seems like we're not looking at everything. That's all I'm saying.
So you're saying that they could have a town meeting and just have the heat really low so the pipes don't freeze and we can wear coats?
No, you can bring it to a minimal level when the building's not occupied. There's nothing that says what level has to be.
So when I look at that, like it gives me shivers, because if anybody has ever owned a vacant home, you are one cold snap and a furnace burnout away from disaster. And if we don't, well, it is, because our responsibility is to maintain the building. So if we lower that temperature to, let's say, 52 degrees, and all of a sudden we get a cold snap for 5 days, and our boiler burns out, and now we've got frozen pipes. Now we have a much bigger issue on our hands. But again, looking at the energy costs for TWB, I mean, we're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking $2,000 a month to just keep the place at a minimal heat. We did a pretty exhaustive look at what the true costs of maintaining that building are. They're non-excessive. And it certainly was a lot less than what we're proposing in terms of emptying the building and reconfiguring existing spaces in our high school.
Buildings that size are very hard to bring up and down temperature. When they're sitting in temperature, they're holding a lot of heat mass and they're carrying a lot of heat mass. You'd actually be surprised if you were thinking you were going to bring it up and down temperature periodically.
Can you use your
based on the rec
microphone?
center.
I'm sorry, people can hear you.
Sorry.
Can you just talk to the microphone?
Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
you'd be surprised the cost of bringing up and down the heat in a building like that, bringing it down and then bringing it back up for events. I don't know how often the rec department or other groups use it. But if they use it a couple times a week, you really absolutely would lose any efficiency of bringing it down to say 52 degrees and then back up to 69 or something for athletics or something like that. It's not quite what.
Which explains why you will have school districts when they're in a cold snap, that if they have a day off on Thursday and the heat goes down, they may very well say, you know what, if there's a chance of inclement weather on Friday, then we're going to we'll take Friday as a snow day, we're going to keep the building low, and then on Sunday, we're going to have the boilers run Sunday afternoon and start ramping the temperature up again. So as he says, when you start with the amount, it's not like you're home, it's not like you just turn the thermostat up in one room. I mean, it's a building.
And by the way, just so, and again, so we're all on the same page, the reason that we have students in that building now, and we have classes and administrators, not classes, administrators and then these special programs in there now, is because I believe it was Superintendent Ganem saying, hey, I'm paying for this. You know, the district is paying for this. The district is paying to keep this building functional. Why don't we use it?
Want to move the 18 to 22-year program out of high school. Because the thought was that the 7th and 8th grade would go there, and then it didn't vote to go there. And he had already moved and made the building stay, because when the idea of it being quote-unquote mothballed, he was concerned that if he didn't keep it as operating as a school, so we had someone who had a principal background, he had a school nurse there, we had a program there, so that technically the mothball hadn't started yet.
I didn't say the mothball, I said that.
No, I was using
Yeah.
school.
Something, just for thought, certainly something that we can bring up in subcommittee on Monday as well.
Sure. So the school committee apparently requested a listing of as much historical information we could regarding fees. You know, having been here, I will say there was, you know, definitely a conscious effort in COVID to kind of pause fees and see where this came to. I know we had some conversations about athletics last year. If you look at starting with athletics, you'll see that our last increase was 2016, 2017 that we're aware of. So, you know, absolutely would athletics be somewhere we might think about raising fees? It's been 6-7 years since we've had an increase in there. Yeah, that might be an area to think about, especially with the situation you're in with athletics.
So, looking at that proposal, and Patrick has made this point in previous meetings, and I certainly don't disagree with him, that, you know, to pay $250 for an entire football season seems very low. What kinds of historical data do we have about because all these fees get paid into the athletic revolving account, correct? So where does that revolving account end up every year? And the reason why I say that is because, I mean, you could jack these fees up. You could double them, and you're not going to change participation. The problem that I would have, however, is that now you have basically a biased system where we're actually having our athletes subsidize the education for the rest of the district. And I don't think that's fair. So the athletic revolving account, in my mind, should basically, the fees should be enough to cover the cost of the athletics, to cover the officiating, to cover all the materials, all the equipment, supplies, repair, anything that you need. But I don't think we should be gouging the kids that play sports just to balance our budget.
So I learned a lot when I asked what it would look like to fully fund last year. We have a few athletic directors that live in town. They were incredibly quick to reach out and share what the impact would be. So what they did say is that you do get to a point where you are going to lose participants based off what that dollar amount is. And when we did the analysis, I think it was last year, I think you did it to say this is what the fee increases would be to fully fund the athletic budget. It is substantial in each of these sports, and it absolutely would have an adverse impact on participation rates. In some cases, the numbers ended up being higher than what some local club programs are charging for fees. So I don't know that we will ever have a scenario that the fees will fully cover the athletic budget. I also don't know from what I learned from these athletic directors that are not an athletic director here but in other communities. I'm not sure that we want to do that and what that impact would be on students, but I do think we can take a closer look at it to see if there's an opportunity to do some things, especially in light of 6% CPI increase. We'll see the next one on April 12th, and then what looks like from years 23 to 32, projected 2.37 annual percent inflation increase. Would think we'd at least stay current with inflation.
Is it possible to get sort of a historical perspective on that? Let's look back. I'd like to look back pre-COVID. Maybe if we do.
That's the numbers. We got the numbers last year.
Right.
So
Aaron, you did.
but with
What fees would look like with the increase in Aaron, I remember you shared, you had done an entire conference.
Yes,
Yeah.
Steve Hale did actually did a lot of work.
Yeah.
We shared that last year. I could try to dig that up.
what I'm interested in is to see what's the delta between what we're paying for fees and what the cost is. That is, at the end of every year, you know, if there's indeed, I don't follow the athletic revolving account that closely, but you know, looking at it, let's say the athletic revolving account has, you know, just per se, $500,000, and at the end of the year, the cost of the sports program is $600,000. So we got a $100,000 difference. So I'm interested to know, like, historically what that delta has been. And then looking forward, I do agree that, you know, fees can be increased, no question about it. But I would want to make sure that we have that delta range kind of in mind.
To answer one of your earlier questions, so pre-COVID, the athletic revolving account and athletics in general, we're in the black. COVID unfortunately did a number. The challenge with having to take more buses to separate kids, having to set up events. I'll say that many other people in my field are talking about the impact of the Maya decision to make all tournaments statewide as opposed to starting at the regional level. So again, you could have that team from North Adams having to play Nantucket in the very first round game. Right? That gets really challenging for transportation costs, right? And then when you get to things like championship games statewide, you know, they centralize and they bring them to a central site. You know, so the Super Bowl was typically played in Westfield State, right, or somewhere like that, somewhere where everybody went. So this need to go play those playoff games all over the place is really cost prohibitive. It's very challenging. So we have pretty successful sports teams. They make the tournaments, and then they have to drive to wherever that tournament is instead of again facing East Hampton locally in the first couple of rounds. For teams like that, now they're having to go across the state to play those games, and that transportation cost is significant. Again, when you get something like a Nantucket, you're going overnight. You have a choice, right? The boats are only so frequent unless you want to fly. So you've got some challenges there.
So how does that decision get made? What tournaments that they participated versus, like, what would be local versus all those other tournament leagues? Because I would think that if you're signing up for that, I mean, we also have families that have kids that do school sports, but they're also signing up for outdoor, I mean, you know,
So
through home outside.
that's the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic
MIAA.
Association, MIAA. So they, again, we used to do regionals, so we would have a Western Mass tournament.
Yep.
And then the winner of the Western Mass tournament would go to the state tournament.
Yep.
Now, it's a full statewide draw for many of these sports. So if you're football, again, you might be traveling across the state. If you're the high seed and another team across the way is the low seed, you may be going to play. If there's, say, 16 teams, right? The 18 plays the 9 team. You may be.
But was that
across the state.
decision made, because I know in other leagues, like Swickle, which falls under MIAA, they didn't have enough students in 2 schools, so they combined schools
Yes.
to have sports teams. So was it because of participation that they did that?
I don't know the rationale.
I wasn't sure if anybody had ever said why, so I'm sorry.
The rationale had to do more with competitiveness. So if you look at it, we're not the only state, so other states have been doing this for a longer period of time. The feeling was that you would often run, so let's use eastern, western, so you go southeast, northeast, east, west, and then they play, and then you'd have central and west, and then you'd have the winner of central west play the winner of, let's say, out there, and what would happen or the perception was that you weren't getting the 2 best teams at the end of the year. The two better teams, let's say, were out east, so I'll use lacrosse because I know that. Let's say Hingham would play BC High. Whoever wins that then comes out and they play, not be the wrong division, but they'd go play Long Meadow, and maybe that's not the right matchup, and so maybe it was St. John's Prep and BC High were the 2 best teams. St. John's Prep and BC High should be the 2 teams that play each other for the state finals. So it had more to do with the competitive nature of athletics than anything. Now, I think what should occur is if there's that much of a concern from a school business officer's standpoint, there probably should be a conversation with the MIA executive committee to say, this is the financial impact that has occurred. So if now students, and you have to pay, right, to go to postseason games, so maybe the portion of the ticket, the gate fee, should come back to the schools to offset the travel expenses. So I would have a conversation from a school business standpoint with MIA to see what can be done to help offset that recoupment.
We just encourage you to have that conversation. I have to.
Sure.
I'm sure that
It's
this,
being had. I mean, gate fees is a big factor in the conversation.
I mean, especially from an equity perspective, where, you know, you want to make sure that every kid has that opportunity, or potentially can have that opportunity.
So I just wanted to go back to what Aaron, you said earlier, because the athletic revolving account was in the black. You were talking about the
It
athletic
was in the
revolving.
black, now it's spending more time in the red.
Right. Well, I mean, that was what he said, but
Yeah.
prior to that, which is why I'm interested to see a more historical perspective, let's say from 14 to 19, like it was a 5-year period, and let's see, like, you know, what were the draws on that revolving account versus what were the fees that were paid in.
Yeah.
I think that would give us a very good perspective. I do agree, like I said, I mean, we haven't seen an increase since 2017. Obviously, the fees would probably definitely need to be adjusted. I'm interested to know, though, how much. As I said before, I just don't want to get into a situation where we're having athletics, subsidizing the rest of education.
I can go, we want to walk through the remaining fees, but are you comfortable having them here? We can, I think student parking, we had that conversation last year, and that was reduced slightly. Student activities, graduation fees, pre-K tuition, which we've had some conversations about.
So we're going to take a look at these?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Is everyone all set? We're moving on to public comment. Is anyone signed up for public comment? Is there anyone here that would wish to make public comment? So we will move on to the subcommittee updates. Cheryl?
Don't get to use it.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Because it was just annoying before that I would raise my hand and stuff, so we got this really cool thing that'll it'll time down so everyone can see your time to make it a better experience for those speaking at meetings.
Maybe next time?
Maybe next time.
We're going to do Monday.
Shirley, you're up. Do you have anything? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so next is me for planning committee. So I will report the feedback that we received from the staff during our meeting on March 28th regarding the 10 district reconfiguration options, most of which required changes to the regional agreement. During the meeting, we gathered feedback from staff on the 10 various building reconfigurations and their potential impact on the students. Sorry. I'll give it to you.
No, I'm just saying, just slow down.
Okay.
You're talking too fast.
We shared that our primary focus is on keeping the educational best interests of students in mind, and that the planning committee has been studying the use of the space and looking to maximize it for education in order to address overcrowding and reduce transitions based on research on their impact. The staff provided valuable feedback, which we were asked to consider. Some of the points made were planning for transitions takes time, looking at space functionally. It looks like the 8th grade could be integrated into the high school model and the school could be run at its highest efficiency. 2 middle schools is not equitable. It's important to maintain the number of students to maintain a grade. Services need to be offered in both towns. Consider academic impact of social emotional impacts of students and students being able to grow together. Equitable class sizes, the lack of diversity when in neighborhood schools, leaving the middle school out of Hampton, maintain 8th grade identity if they were to transition, so fleshing out the details and thinking about the experience of the student. Grade band versus number of transitions are not equal in weight. Bringing 8th graders into high school offers increased opportunities in classes. The challenges dedicating spaces to 8th grade students would require the possibility of needing to close specialized classrooms to dedicate space to the 8th grade students, and moving pre-K from Mile Train Extension to Green Meadows. So we will carefully consider all of the feedback received as we continue to work towards identifying the most effective reconfiguration options for our district. Our next meeting is Tuesday, April 11th at 5:30 in the district's conference room. Does anyone have any questions? Move on to budget and finance.
We have a meeting on Monday night,
At,
5 p.m. in the district office.
thank you, sorry.
Thank you very much, Maura, by the way, for shortening the policy meeting to allow that to happen.
Well, I can't be 2 places at once.
Yes.
Thank you, budget, for shortening our meeting.
I was waiting to see if he was going to thank you. Thank you, Will.
The LP, the collaborative representative, who said not here this evening. I have nothing to report on the corporation or negotiation subcommittee. We'll move on to the policy subcommittee, Maura.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so in your packet, sorry about that. In your packets, you will have 3 policies with the guidance provided from the MASC. The policy subcommittee had done our earnest and arduous process of reviewing and updating the school committee policies. We are presenting 3 policies for first reading tonight. The first policy is KCD, public gifts to schools. The second policy is IKF, graduation requirements. And the third policy is JH, student absences and excuses. So I would ask that you guys take some time to review those tonight. If there's any questions, please feel free to bring them to the next full committee meeting. Or you can email me and I will address it at the next policy sub at mryan@hwrsd.org. Let's see, and our next meeting will be Monday at 4 p.m. in the district office for 1 hour. Any
Probably
questions?
55 minutes to get the finance committee ready.
What's that?
Probably should 55 minutes.
At least 20.
Okay. Thank you. Move on to consent agenda.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Questions, concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0. Move on to the superintendent's update.
Thank you. Let me begin with the enrollment report, which as of April 1st stood at 2,876, an increase of 5 from last month. As I noted in February, coordinating the district's equity audit will be my main work for the late winter and early spring. In your packets, I've provided a list of more than 350 documents that we produced for the auditors as of the end of last week. This week we received an additional document request for about 10 more items. You're familiar with some of these documents, so you know some of them are quite lengthy. The total number of pages being reviewed by the auditors easily numbers in the thousands. More than 1,800 surveys were received from participants, and more than 100 people participated in focus groups. I share this information to make the public aware that this was a thorough and participatory process. Looking at the list of documents provided, I think we can anticipate some potential findings. I note the paucity of documents we could supply concerning our multi-tiered system of supports, and suspect the auditors will encourage the district to pay attention to shoring that up, which should come as no surprise because that was also noted as a priority in our strategic plan. I actually hope to turn my attention to beginning to work on the multi-tiered system of supports now that this equity audit is essentially done as far as my participation in facility. There will be, I expect, extensive recommendations that will require their own plan to implement next year and in years moving forward. I think the equity audit will probably overlap and reinforce some of the things that we noted in our strategic plan, such as the MTSS, but I also think that it will probably reveal some blind spots that may have been part of our strategic plan. So it will give us an opportunity to address some things that may not currently be on the radar screen. So I really am gratified by the participation in this. I can tell you that the auditors visiting our district were amazed at the response of the community. One of them shared with me they'd never seen such a response rate from the district. So I think that was an effort well done. I'm also happy to report that the website review and evaluation team has finished the first phase of this process. As I reported at prior meetings, we've been in the process of meeting with various vendors to identify the desirable features of our website upgrade. Those included ADA compliance and translation capability, mobile integration, the capacity to mirror changes in one place wherever it appears on the website, content approval process, compatibility with the Redditor database, the ability to host multiple schools and programs, dynamic news feeds, and Google integration, to name a few. With these desired features in mind, we've solicited quotes from vendors and concluded that Redditor provides the best solution as we move forward. I've met with the chair of the Fine and Applied Arts Department to see how students could be involved with the development of assets for the website. One of the things I've learned is the videos, the pictures, everything that goes on a website is called assets, and a term of art for that. And the response I've got is that the students are really excited about being able to be content developers. So I think also our students grew up in a world that always included the internet and websites, and so they may have a better taste of what is effective and not effective than some of the folks who put together our current website, let's say. So look, I have a kickoff meeting scheduled with Redditor next week, and look forward to laying out the work plan for that as we begin to migrate our system over from EdLeo to Redditor. And so to recap progress that's been made on the strategic plan during the past 6 months when it's been in operation, 12 of the 18 steps identified for this year have been completed. 2 are in progress, 4 have not been started. I've already talked about one of those, which is MTSS. Another action step for this year was to launch an annual climate survey. I'd like to propose that we have fulfilled this goal well enough through the equity audit survey process for this year. Students in tested grades will also be participating in the vocal survey as part of the MCAS administration, and many students will also be participating in expert screening in the weeks ahead. So I think introducing another climate survey at this time runs the risk of inducing survey fatigue. So I think the best thing we should do this year is just identify the survey that we'd like to use and wait for actual administration for next year. I think the fall might be a good time to do the administration, because that's a time when we don't typically have a lot of other surveys going on. After consulting with administrative and instructional staff, I feel I've identified a high-quality measure we can use to achieve this part of the strategic plan. So next year would be our first administration to establish baselines, and then in future years, hopefully we could show some improvements from that. It's the School Qualities Measure Student and Teacher Survey Scales developed by the Education Commonwealth Project. We have a colleague in the room who knows a lot more about that than I do. So to finish my report, I'd like to introduce Dr. Spencer Robinson of ECP. I had the pleasure of doing some really innovative labor management work with Julie when she was the president of the Northampton Educators Association. I also served with her as a member of the Smith Vocational Technical Agricultural High School Board of Trustees. We'll also be presenting this together this summer with a former Associate Commissioner of Education at the Mass Executive Institute. So at this time, I will yield to Julie to talk about the survey.
Thank you. That's quite an introduction. I have a hand up.
Can we put a title on this document? Because I don't know what it is.
Sure, thank you.
That is the list of documents we provided for the equity audit.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me some time tonight. My name is Julie Spencer Robinson, and I'm the Director of Engagement for the Education Commonwealth Project, as Dr. Provost now noted. We're based at UMass Lowell. I'm actually located in Northampton.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Can you speak more to your microphone, just so that other people, because we have people that are on remote,
Of course.
just want to make sure they can hear you, the speakers.
How is it now?
Are you all right?
Hold it, maybe
You
I'm
probably just, I'm sorry.
sorry about that.
Should we practice for this before? Tell me if I can hear.
That's much better. Thank you, I'm sorry.
Absolutely not. I want to be heard. So we're based at UMass Lowell and led by Jack Schneider, who has a well-known podcast in the education policy world. I'm pleased to be able to tell you about our school quality measures suite of tools that we offer to districts for free. These tools were developed as an alternative to the current state accountability system, which is primarily based on student MCAS scores. Our data dashboard visualizes the assessment of school quality across 5 domains: teachers and leadership, school culture, resources, academic learning, and community and well-being. We use 3 instruments for our assessment: a student perception survey, a teacher perception survey, and administrative data that districts already report to DESE. Multiple measures provide a holistic picture of school strengths and areas for improvement. I want to tell you a little about how our surveys were developed. I'll start by saying that the process took several years and several $1 million, some of it provided by the Gates Foundation, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and our state legislature. Many surveys start with constructs that are created internally. An organization's leader or team decides what's important to measure, and then they develop a survey instrument to do that. In our case, we began by asking stakeholders in Massachusetts districts to identify what they wanted from their public schools. And then we built our surveys to measure those characteristics. The validity and reliability of our surveys sets them apart from others. We drew from a number of survey scales and adapted them, and also created some of our own. You can see all of our scales in the document that's included in your packet. Our work with Hunter Gelbach from Panorama. It's a survey, licensed survey company you might have heard of. Even improved their survey scales with better psychometric properties. The surveys have been rigorously field tested by the 8 districts that belong to the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment. Our student survey also has an intelligent design. We wanted it to be comprehensive, but we didn't want it to be too long. So we intentionally limited it to the minimum viable number of questions. The survey is actually 6 different forms that interlock to add up to a coherent whole. Essentially, every student answers 2/3 of the questions in about 20 minutes time. There are links to demonstrations of our student and teacher surveys in that same document, so you can check them out yourselves. I want to note that all survey data is aggregated at the school level and cannot be traced to individual students or teachers. If you decide to use our tools, you can choose your own adventure. You can administer just the student survey, just the teacher survey, or the 2 of them together. If you want the complete dashboard, you administer both surveys, and we collect the necessary administrative data directly from DESE. We clean the data and produce a dashboard within 4 to 6 weeks from the time surveys are given. We also offer support to help your district operationalize the data. This can take just about any form you could imagine. We'll meet with your district leadership team, principals, educators, families, community members to help them understand the data, explore it, and determine how they want to use it. We're also happy to give general informational presentations with a critique of the current accountability system and an explanation of alternatives. It sounds like I'm selling something, but I'm not. As I said at the beginning, everything is free. The funds we receive from the state legislature support our work because they're interested in exploring how school and district accountability might look different from our current model. Governor Healy has included continued funding for us in her budget for the next fiscal year. And MCIEA will actually be joining ECP at UMass Lowell, which means their district leaders will be able to serve as resources to you if you decide you want to become an ECP district. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and if I can't, we've got a great team who can. And thank you again for this time tonight. Okay, you go.
I'm going to turn my microphone on. Can you tell me a school that's currently in Massachusetts that's currently utilizing your, I'm so excited.
Yay.
I've been asking for some sort of dashboard since I got on the school committee, and there's no reason to me that there shouldn't be that data out there. And I realize it's very time consuming to have to pull that data from somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what you can offer, but I'm curious, are you providing that dashboard to any schools in Massachusetts currently? And if so, who?
I want to give a 2-part answer to that. The Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment is 8 districts out in the eastern part of the state. They made their way west as got as far as Long Meadow, but it's a little bit complicated to join the consortium, which is partly why we exist. So those 8 districts are Wareham and Winchester, Attleboro, Lowell, Somerville, Revere, and I will think of the other 2 in a minute. So far this year, we've just started in September. The mission of ECP is to get these tools. MCIA was created in 2016, and their governing board is made up of 8 superintendents and 8 union presidents. And their mission is to implement both. We have 2 sets of tools you'll see from the back sheet. We have the school quality measures data dashboard, and then we have performance assessments for that we actually have like a portfolio performance as a graduation requirement to replace MCAS as a competency determination. But these 8 districts have implemented both sets of tools since 2016 to varying degrees. Oh, Boston is another one with 8. How could I forget? Milford is at 8. I got them all. Okay. So they've implemented the tools. The pandemic hit, as you all know. It just threw a monkey wrench into things and kind of slowed things down, and then they were able to pick up the pace again. But we came into existence because we didn't want the tools to stay within those 8 districts. We wanted to get them out to as many districts as possible. So we started in September. There's a tremendous amount of interest statewide, as you might imagine, especially since they're free. Well, actually, I think because of the rigor with which they've been developed and field tested by these 8 districts, they're incredible tools. As Dr. Provost said, I was a middle school teacher for 25 years, a union president for 4. I'm now on the Smith Vocational Agricultural High School Board of Trustees. I think I met some of you at MASC in November. And there's nothing like this to meet the needs in all of those areas. Like the MCAS didn't reflect my subject, social studies, right? As a union president, the teacher experience was never centered in any assessment of school quality, and I strongly feel that it should be. Their teachers are incredible. And as a school committee member, MCAS tells us very little about our students and what our students have accomplished in their time in our school. So this really means all of us. So there's a lot of interest. We have already implemented the surveys and created the dashboards for Lee and for Maynard. And we have...
What was the second one?
Maynard.
Okay, sorry.
And we've got, no problem. And we've got 8 other districts in the pipeline.
So do you take into account any of the other testings that schools are doing at the same time, like the BAS? I apologize to ask you, there was another one, I can't remember what it's called.
Bass Bridge.
Yes.
In what sense?
In the data that you're going to use on your dashboard.
The dashboard is made up, you actually will be able to customize your own dashboard. So the dashboard that the MCIA districts, it's made up of 34 different components that fall within those 5 domains, right? If you wanted to look at other aspects of school quality that aren't included within those 34 components, we can customize that for you. It's going to take it takes a little bit more time because we want it to be valid and reliable, right? We're not just going to say, oh, they're really interested in school lunches, super important. They want them to be nourishing and locally sourced and whatever. So let's just ask some questions about the school lunch. We'll add them to the survey. No, it's all carefully calculated, carefully balanced, right? So the 34 components, one of those components is academic performance. And you can use any metric that you want for that, and you can use as many as you want for that. If you want to use MCAS scores for that, you absolutely can. That, in my own professional opinion, right sizes MCAS as 1/34th of the overall picture of a school or a district, right? If you want it to be the SGPs for the student growth percentiles on MCAS, if you want it to be any assessments that are already administered within your district, you can choose those. If you want them to be performance assessments, which is where some of the MCIA districts are moving, it can be those.
Thank you.
There you go.
I think you said, I hope I got it right, that we clean the data. What does cleaning the data entail? Because that sounds kind of frightening.
Gotcha. It's more of a research term. So let's say with a teacher survey, the teacher survey takes between 20 to 25 minutes to take. If a survey has been completed in 90 seconds, that's not an accurate response, and so we eliminate it from the data set. That's an example of cleaning the data.
Do you have metrics that go along with that cleaning so that it's formative for all of the questions?
Tell me a little bit more what you're...
Well, if someone couldn't get past 90 seconds,
right? If they
do you have metrics that say these questions we would expect people to get to number 16 at least for it to be valid?
I can't answer that question, but our school quality measures team certainly can, to ask what criteria they use when they clean the data. I can tell you that we use Qualtrics as our survey platform, which is really well regarded, especially in academia. We have access to it because we're based at UMass Lowell.
I think this is a two-part question.
Sure.
What do you do with our data other than put it in the dashboard? What do you use for our
I'm
data?
so glad that you asked it. You're actually in control of the data, and you can do whatever you want with it. So we will host it on our dashboard if you want us to, and it will be password protected, and you will determine who has the password and who has access to it. Our dashboard can be you can download it within a district if you
I'm
have.
thinking more of a macro.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm more of a macro. Do you take our information and sell it to anybody? Do you
No.
take the information from the schools and share it with the other schools?
No,
Okay.
not unless you want to. So getting back to a question that you asked earlier, Drew, I was saying about the MCIA districts. If you go to the MCIA website, they just voted as a consortium last year to make all of their data public, which is a huge step, because one of the worries, especially in larger districts, I don't know if it's a worry here, but is schools being compared to one another. So if they started in 2016 and then 2022, it took them 6 years to work with the data internally within their districts, within the schools, before they felt comfortable making it all public. But you can go to the MCIA website and you can see all of their dashboards for all of their schools and all of the ones that administer the surveys and the administrative data from DESE. So they made that decision together as a consortium. But for our dashboard, you control it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good to hear.
What are the results? Right, so when you listed the school districts, Winchester stood out to me
Yeah.
as a pretty high-performing district.
Yeah.
The others not so much. So what have we seen from baseline to where they are today?
In terms of
Performance
in
growth.
terms of how they have grown. That's a good question for me to bring to the MCIA districts, and it's something that we are certainly talking about. I can tell you in the case of Winchester, the reason why they joined the consortium, and the consortium was intentional of having a mix of urban, rural, and suburban districts, and larger and smaller districts as well. It's a real mix of those. Winchester, which is a high-performing district, felt really strongly that MCAS told a very limited piece of the story. They wanted a much more comprehensive understanding of their students' educational experiences, and that's what the dashboard does. So each district decides how they want to operationalize the data. So you're asking me, I think, how have they grown in 34 different areas since they started with this work in 2016? And it's not an easy question to answer, but it's a 100% important question to ask. And I'll get an answer for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And if you'd like, I can pair you, I can connect you with the Winchester School Committee member who would love to talk about her district's experience with it.
Yes, that would be great.
I was going to see if we can have someone come for a visit.
I thought like a phone call.
Not to put our administrators on the spot, but this is the first I've seen this. I'm just interested to see what y'all think of this, and where. I mean, this is again, I've never heard of this. I don't know if you guys have worked with anybody or spoken to anybody about it, but I'm kind of interested to hear the perspective of people who have lived the educational world.
So I think what appeals to me about this is the work that's been done to validate the measures. There are so many surveys that people are asked to take that are developed seemingly by people who met in a room and just came up with questions and decided to ask them without really testing them to know whether they measured anything. And I think if we're going to be using a climate survey as a means of trying to drive creating better school environments for students and staff to be in, we want to base that on measures that we think actually measure something validly. So that's one thing that appealed to me. I did also consider the vocal. I think it was my other strong candidate, which I reported to the school committee on when I gave the accountability report, which also has that characteristic of being very well developed, validated, etc., has an unlimited database. One of the things that is missing from that, though, is staff perspective. It's only the students. So I think this balances that. It brings in another dimension by gathering some feedback from staff as well as from the students.
Aaron, you got anything to add?
No.
Gina, I'm just curious.
No, so I just think of it as, like, their job is to provide us with the data, and when you ask, like, have districts improved based on this data, like, I guess I just think of it as it's up to each district to use the information to develop a plan to improve areas of deficit. So I guess I think of it as the district's responsibility to show growth based on the data presented, and their charge is more to give us the data and give us the tools to create a plan to move forward and get better.
And our hope is we are equipped to also work with districts to help them understand the data and decide how they want to operationalize it, right? So we will work with those districts to do that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll add is we have been talking about data dashboard forever and ever, but we haven't thought of it in 34 separate data points. It was very much in my memory focusing on the academic data and our universal screening data. And we know that social emotional, that information, knowing about how students and staff feel in the learning environment is so important. You can't learn if there's not joy in the classroom. So the data will be so much more comprehensive, and then we can look to see where it is that we want to put our focus to elevate the school experience academically, socially, etc.
My next question, sorry, is you provided us with the 8 participating districts. You said you have 15 others that are.
So those are the 8 districts that belong to the consortium, right? And ECP is brand new as of September to get the tools out to other districts.
Okay. And you said you had some others.
We have
15.
I think 8 others.
8 others that are interested.
Where we've been meeting, we're planning, we're about next steps.
Would you be able to share those other districts with us so that we may be able to contact them to talk to them about what does it look like for them? What was their thought process around it? And what are their goals trying to achieve?
I'm thinking probably of Lee and Maynard who have gone forward with it, with the tools, whereas the others are further along than where you are maybe, or but still in the.
We're still getting any information regarding those other districts. I think being able to talk with them, kind of get their perspective, I think would be great informative.
And we are a learning organization, and that's absolutely what we're trying to do as well, is to understand, even just in our short history, the districts are interested in the tools for very different reasons, and that is informing our own work. I want to add also that we are piloting a K-3 survey. If you want to get the kindergartner experience, it's pretty cool. So you're welcome to pilot that survey as well if you want. And we're working on developing a parent survey, but it's the challenge with any parent survey is representation, where you aren't going to be able to get a representative sample of your parents without some real legwork and intention. But we're developing that survey as well.
What would you say the standard amount of time for the survey is right now?
To take the survey?
Yeah.
It's 20 minutes for students and 25 for teachers.
Because I wonder if sometimes that may be considered too long.
A lot.
Some people, like, I know when you say someone does something in 90 seconds, there are some people that are fast readers and can comprehend
That's the field testing part of it. It was much longer to begin with, and then they shortened.
I couldn't remember that you would give that, but I'll write that down.
Tested lots and lots, yeah.
Thank you very much. This was great. Thank you very much.
It's almost like a little bird who has dropped a flyer off to eavesdropping on our meetings the last couple of years and said, hey, you know what, we have this one here.
That's Dr. Close. It's Facebook. Who's got their Facebook right
Okay, so we will move on to future agenda items. We have Booster Club. What do we value? Middle school program of studies. We also have the Mile Train Green Meadows playground. And then we also have the athletic piece. And participation schedule. Is there anything else that you would like added?
School choice survey and the equity audit survey results. 'Cause I know we know the surveys went out, but then there was never a result. We never circled back to close that out. If we can do that. Scan?
On school choice?
Yes. And then I'm just interested to see if there were results from the equity audit survey.
If I may,
Use your microphone again.
the contract with Mass Insight includes a presentation to the school committee on the full equity audit at the end of the year. So that will happen.
I wasn't sure and I didn't want to assume.
Are those survey windows still open? Because I know that I filled out a survey as a school committee member, and then I circled back in to try to do it as a parent, and it wouldn't let me in. And I tried to do it on a different device, I still got the same thing.
The windows are closed now. They stopped taking results last week.
That's unfortunate.
We don't need to talk about a data request, but we have the number of school choice students in the district each year from 2008 until this year, please.
The number?
The number, correct. Thank you.
What is the guy pilot? Pilot. Just sounded like a pilot down there. Sounded like a pilot.
All right, we did the need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares. L. Broad. And C. Avezzi. Mass General Law, C-30A, Section 21A, 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, specifically Mass General Law, C-214, Section 1B, Massachusetts Student Records Law, Mass General Law, C-71, Section 34D, Massachusetts Student Record Regulations, 603 CMR 23 et sequentia, and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, 20 U.S.C. Section 1232G and 34 CFR Part 99, regarding student transfer requests. Executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, C, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, including case number MEP-22-9541 et al. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares.
Motion to adjourn our executive session. Or adjourn.
Second.
So we will be returning to regular session simply to adjourn, so we will do roll call to go into executive session. Bill?
Aye.
Cheryl? Aye. Sean?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Maura?
Aye.
And myself, aye. We're now moving to executive session, 8:35.
See if the warrants are signed.
Yeah, I signed it.